and welcome again to Zoomed In on Candid Conversation Zoomed In and Comments channel, video comments channel. My name is Cliff. I am joined in the Zoom today by or with Kevin Blakely. He is a guy that talks to and develops and helps teams deal with and manage creativity. I thought this was an interesting subject, so I reached out to him. And Kevin, thank you very much for taking the time to jump in here to talk about creativeness and building a creative and collaborative team. It really is an important subject matter today.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on. I'm super excited to have the chat and see how we can boost everyone's creativity.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the first things I noticed is that you talk about something that is really interesting here is something called creative culture. Can you explain that? What is creative culture?
Yeah, everyone kind of focuses on creativity at a personal level. You know, we have these geniuses that just have great ideas. But really, what we want to replicate is something like the Renaissance. You know, that was not just one person having a great idea or inventing a new style of painting. That was a community and a culture that was really driven towards just making the most beautiful world that is possible. And there's a lot of background that can go into that and how we can set up corporations, the practice and procedures, and then how they interact with each other really can drive creativity or hinder creativity. One of the examples I use a lot is looking back at the Kodak company, right? They were the largest producer of film and photography in the world, and they actually invented the digital camera back in the 70s. But someone was like, oh no, we're a film company, we sell all this film, why would we create something that's going to ruin that business for us? So they slept on it, they missed out on it, and someone else had the brilliant idea. And that's kind of what I see is companies get so big, the creativity just stops and freezes up. They get complacent with the status quo, and then some new company will come in and disrupt the industry and take over. So it's all about building a creative culture, which will generate more and better ideas for everyone.
Yeah, which is kind of a critical point here, right? It sounds like what you're saying here is sometimes companies like Kodak, as you mentioned, get so big that that it gets lost in the mix.
Mhm.
And before you know it, they're kind of going, "What happened?" And I think that's really what happened to them because at one point they did look back and say, "What happened here? We're no longer the predominant uh, company in this space." And it's due to the fact that they kind of lost that creative edge, isn't it?
Yeah, precisely. And there's a lot that happens with large companies like that. And it's, you know, it's not their like totally their fault because they're driven to make money, right? They're not driven to make change. And then someone will come along and change everything, and now they're no longer making money. Um, but one thing about creativity that people don't really understand is kind of a general definition. First of all, is creativity is basically having a new and unique thought or idea that is deemed to be good by other people. And so, if we're going to have a new idea within a corporation, it has to go through a lot of filters. And if you look at a startup company where it's like maybe 10 employees, there's not many filters. You know, you have an idea, it goes straight to the CEO, and the CEO can make a radical change just like that. But in a larger corporation, there becomes so many different layers that the idea has to pass through that you can't get it to the person that can actually implement it or make the changes. And that's kind of what I do is in my workshops, I always have a pre-assessment to try to diagnose at what point is the idea getting lost or broken on the way up to the person that can actually make the change.
Which leads to my next question. Building creative culture. How do you go about doing that? What's the building model?
Yeah, so I kind of the first things I talk about with people is getting rid of the roadblocks to creativity. And we shoot ourselves in the foot so much of the time. So you know, the first thing that people mess up with is fear. Fear will crush creativity immediately. If you think about the times when you have the best ideas or something like that, A lot of creative processes are just kind of like, I had my great idea in the shower, or I'm on a walk. Steve Jobs famously would take walks all the time, and that's where he would do his talking and thinking. And you're in a relaxed environment, you're in a calm, peaceful state, and then ideas are able to come to us. If we're in a scared environment, we go into fight or flight, and when we're in fight or flight, we do not allow ourselves, like, our neurons are thinking about what kept me alive in the past. And that's when our instincts take over and we immediately are trying to just survive. And so our neurons get very connected in one specific area. We're not thinking about, oh, well, this kept me alive last time. Maybe I should change it up and do something different this time. So fear, if you have a culture of fear and judgment of other people's ideas, then you're going to crush creativity itself. The second one is a little bit trickier. And the second thing that kills creativity is scripts, or how we are programmed to interact with each other, right? So, one of the examples I like to think of is when we are at when we're in school, we have a teacher and the teacher has all the right answers, right? They give us the assignment, we're a good student and we perform exactly how the teacher wanted, and then we get a good grade on the test. Um, but in the business world, it doesn't really work that way. We need to change that paradigm. And so we're running a script of I'm a good student in the work world, and the boss comes to work, he gives us an assignment, we complete the assignment, and then everything moves on. But in that world, it kind of ruins it, because if I have a great idea, if you're in a cutting edge business, the boss doesn't know all the answers. The boss is hiring you to tell you all the answers or to figure them out, right? And so if you have those ideas, but you're like, oh, the teacher knows all the right answers, I don't have to give them my thoughts or inputs, then you're crushing it, right? You're losing it out on it. So you need to change that paradigm of what is our relationship? What is the script that we are running back and forth with each other? I think a better model is the football coach and the player, where the football coach sets up the game plan and writes all the plays out, but then the player that's actually executing them has the freedom and the leeway to make the changes that he thinks and to move as his will, and then he gives feedback to the coach, and they can change it up and reevaluate the game plan moving forward. And then the final thing that crushes creativity is personal ego. We've all been in those meetings where they don't really want to solve the problem. They just want to be right. They just want to be the person that looks good at the end of the day. And so if you don't check your personal ego and you're not more invested in solving the problem than you are with actually looking good, then you're not going to have any good ideas, and you're not going to have a culture that values solutions more than just being right.
Yeah, I can imagine. We'll take Tesla as an example. Elon Musk. I can imagine that at the top of this, he's just saying, no, 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 we're going to do it this way, as opposed to letting people who are thinkers, who are creative minds, come forward and educate him and say, hey, look, let's try something a little different. Not saying that he does that, but sometimes it would appear that way with big companies like Tesla, or like Kodak in the past. And you crush that, and you just basically say, well, I'm the guy. I make this, I run this. The orchestra is you. I'm the one who's conducting. You're going to follow what I do. Um, Kind of like I do as I say, don't do as I do. And that, as you pointed out, kind of it snuffles, or snuffs out, if I can put it that way, the creativity. Is that what you're trying to say?
Yeah, more or less. Personal ego will definitely crush things. And Elon Musk is a fascinating example, because he kind of, like, he will just dictate something impossible to his people and just be like, just figure it out. And being under that kind of pressure or those kind of restraints can help creativity, because if you're doing something that's never been done before, then you're kind of in a world where any idea might be a good idea, and it kind of in a weird way frees you to have ideas in that regard. So it is interesting. It's kind of like the space mission when we were doing the Apollo launches. we're going to reach the moon by the end of the decade. And now everyone's like, oh shoot, we got to do it, and no one knows how to do it. And so you're in this world where you're free to have new ideas because no one's done something. It's when, like, maybe Tesla for now, where they're just, oh, we're an electric car company, we make these cars, they drive themselves. Now they have their business model, they're making money finally. Maybe now they're getting stuck into that status quo. And Elon might just be too ADD to stay focused on one particular thing at a time. Man, I'd be terrified to peer into that guy's brain.
Yeah, well, he has Asperger's, which is basically a really interesting uh, cognitive disorder. I'd like to explore that at one point with somebody else who knows this kind of stuff. And being a person in the lead as he is, I'm sure that comes into play, or ADHD or ADD, and that can bring out creativeness, because sometimes when your cognition is a little different from what we call normal, um, even a person who is on the autism spectrum may have some very creative ideas. So we got to look at all the angles here. And is that one of the things too that we need to do as far as developing that creative culture, is look at all the angles and incorporate as many different minds in the mixer?
Yeah, it's definitely good to have as many perspectives as possible. Because you want a good mix of people when you're doing a proper brainstorming session there, to have like, you want some people that don't know what's possible and what's impossible there, and then you want some older people that are like, well, this is how we've always done it. And having that mix kind of is a good balance to generating ideas. But really the first step is defining what the problem actually is. I see it so many times in a boardroom where you have these two executives that are just going back and forth at each other, saying, we need to do this is the correct action to move forward, no, this is the right way of going forward. And they're both legitimate solutions, right? But they're solutions to completely different problems. And this is something that always frustrates me about politics is, if you look at one side's perspective, it's like, okay, well, that's a good solution, I suppose, to this specific problem. And then the other side's like, well, that's not going to solve the problem, but they're looking at completely different problems with things too. And so that's why politicians will never agree unless they're actually forced to agree on what problem they're trying to solve. So it gets all over the place. But defining the problem is definitely the first step to coming up with a solution. And it also unifies the group and kind of defines the parameters of what we're trying to do at this specific moment in time.
Hmm. So with that in mind, what are the pillars of creativity? What are the key things you're trying to get across to people when you network with them?
Yeah, so like, creativity at its utmost is, you want to reverse the things that are killing creativity, right? So you want to allow yourself to think laterally. So you need to be in a relaxed state. You need to be open to what's going on around you. And then the other thing is putting in the work. The best way to have a good idea is to have a lot of ideas. And you need to be in an environment where it's okay to have a bad idea, and throw that out there, because most ideas are just bad ideas, and you got to get through all the bad ones to have a good idea. If you look at a lot of creative processes from different artists throughout the year, or the centuries, they all kind of fall into a repetitive pattern. And it's just, they're going to write 1,000 words a day or something, or they're going to paint one painting a day, or even the mathematicians or something, they'll fall into this routine of like, I wake up in the morning and I work from this hour to this hour, then I have my coffee break. And getting into that habit of repeating yourself, and it's being more about just executing your plan rather than it is trying to come up with something brilliant in the moment, is a good way of going about it. And so the pillars of creativity on a cultural standpoint are just trying to allow the generation of ideas, as many as possible, uniting the group around the problem you're trying to solve at the moment, identifying problems, and then allowing your ego to go away and be more committed to solving the problem at hand.
Right. And I'm assuming that when you're in a session with corporate leaders or even small business leaders or anybody in general, really talking about all of this, I would assume that you probably have a big whiteboard and you say, okay, let's throw some stuff on here, see what we get out of this and, mix it up. Is that part of the process?
Yeah, so it depends on what we're trying to do at the time. If we're doing a workshop, I have a bunch of slides and presentation materials to go through. But if I'm called in for an actual brainstorming session to lead and like solve a problem for people, then that's when the whiteboard comes out. Because the problem solving process and the brainstorming process are all kind of the same. Some people will throw out acronyms, we'll do the root cause analysis first, and then we have this way of generating ideas. But there's three main structures to every good problem solving and brainstorming session. It's one, first, as I was saying, identify the problem at hand. Once everyone agrees on what the problem is, then we can move forward to the next section, and that is generating as many solutions to the problem as possible. So if we have a problem up there, we need to write down every solution that would theoretically solve the problem, no matter how infeasible, no matter how ridiculous of an idea it is. And it should just be a challenge at that point to put up as many ideas on the board as possible. And the very key thing is we cannot have any negativity in the room at that point in time. It's just a fun thing of generating as many ideas as possible with no judgment of how bad the idea is, because we need to put all the bad ideas up on the board. One thing that kills it right then and there, and I always identify the negative person in the room at that moment, because someone will throw out an idea and it's just way out of left field, and someone will go, that'll never work. And it's like, that just kills it. Now everyone else in the room heard you, and no one else wants to present another idea that might be that groundbreaking idea because it is just crazy. And so those people get kicked out of the room. But it's also kind of an improv cycle too. Like, you want something where it should be fun, there should be laughter. I always throw out, like, well, we could always hire a witch doctor to curse the other company, and that'll take them down. And then people are like, started laughing and giggling. I'm like, and then I write it down on the board next to everything else. And so just that gets them thinking like, oh, okay, we're throwing out any idea, we could hire the mob and some hitmen for it or something, right? But it's just a challenge of how many ideas can we get up there that would theoretically solve the problem. And that's when you start getting some crazy stuff. And then once everyone in the room agrees that we have all the possible solutions up on the board, that's when we move into stage 3, which is defining the solution. And that's when you start crossing off the obvious, we can't do that stuff. But then you'll notice that you start drawing lines to stuff, and you start connecting different ideas with each other and be like, hey, maybe these two kind of pair up with each other. And you can slowly start to meander towards the correct solution. So, those 3 steps are kind of what I do when I'm teaching a brainstorming workshop.
Yeah, okay. So the witch doctor and the mob, they will go away.
Yeah, exactly. Those,
Yeah.
you can
No,
cross those
we're
off.
not
And,
doing that.
yeah, unless it's Enron or something, and then the questionable moral
Yeah.
practices.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So I would assume that's the first step, though, is to take the toxic air out. Get that out of the way. Have you actually ever really said to somebody, look, you're being just too negative. We want you to leave. Have you ever actually kicked somebody out of a session?
Um, it depends on how important they are, or like in the organization. You can't, like, if the guy that's paying you, you can't really like kick out of the room. But I always call it out, and I'd be like, we're not, like, that's next step. You'll get your chance to be negative, but not yet. Hold on right there. I have been in a brainstorming session before where a guy just could not do it. It crushed the brainstorming session, and we had to talk with that guy later, and he ended up leaving the team itself. Actually, it was just he was just one of those type A, like, no, this is impossible, we can't even suggest that on for fun at this point in time. So it does get to that point, and it is a good way to identify who the really critical people are in the room.
Yeah, I know. We had somebody in our call center. I can't name the call center where I work because of reasons of confidentiality in what we do. But we had a guy that basically came in and he basically just upended everything. He wasn't very, he was trying to help, but he did it the wrong way and it screwed everything up. And in the end, we had to bring in new people and oust him. And that's what happened. They had to bring in a whole new leadership group, basically to say, okay, we need to fix this because this guy really upended everything and upset, a couple hundred agents. And the bottom line is we also have to understand the front line, whether we're talking about a call center or whether we're talking Xerox or any other of these companies, the front line is it. They make it happen. Without them, it don't go. But we also still need our managers as well. So, and it also allowed us to be a little more creative once that person was um, gone to say, well, this is what we're looking to do, and this is how we can help you as the front line. So some of that creativity started to come back in. And we're getting better. We're still growing, but we're getting better because we took that negativity out. So I understand what you're saying. We want to take the toxicity out, and then this way the creativity can flow and you can move into the next step. How do you go about when a company comes to you and asks, what are the first things you will do to start engagement with regard to this particular thing with respect to creative culture?
Yeah. First, I'll ask, are you looking for, a keynote? Do you just want someone to kind of come in and talk to everyone? Or are you looking to do the full assessment and really get to the root cause issues? And, a lot of times it'll just be asking, what are your concerns right now? What are you worried about? What are you seeing on your end? And that's kind of when things come to light from there. Like, my team just, they never have any great ideas, or a lot of it is like they're always looking to me to tell them what to do, and I'm paying these people to just do stuff. And so that's another one I hear a lot as well. And it's kind of trying to figure out where they think the disconnect is. And then I give the survey out anonymously to their team. And then we come back with some different stuff because I give the team a chance to rate the managers and how the managers are they open to new ideas? Do they consider their team input before making decisions? Like a lot of those questions come out, and that it's sometimes it doesn't shed good light on the manager, but if they have the courage to do it, then we're going to do it that way. And then I'll build up a workshop customly made for that particular team, and give them the workshop, and then we can do a post assessment to see how things have changed.
How did you get into this? I mean, this is obviously a very fascinating field, creative
Mhm.
culture. What got you into it?
Yeah, so it kind of started out from being obsessed with problem solving as a kid. Just I was always with the puzzle books and everything like that. But then it really my first peek into like how the brain works and really what is going on inside there came with trying to understand my own learning disabilities and trying to figure out how to teach myself stuff. So I had bilateral retinoblastoma as a child, which is a relatively common eye cancer. And I was treated with radiation therapy back in the early 90s. And basically, what that is shooting lasers into the side of your temple to kill the tumors that are in the back of your eye. And the radiation therapy is really good at killing the cancer, but it also kills pretty much everything else that's around it. So it left me blind in one eye. And then also the left temporal lobe is right behind the eye right there, the orbital. And so the left temporal lobe is responsible for language and memory centers. And learning new languages and learning in general, trying to remember stuff long term has been very difficult for me throughout my life. And so I got into college, and I was doing my mechanical engineering degree, and I just flashcards were useless to me. I had this one professor who would not let us have a cheat sheet with all the equations on it.
Hmm.
And so it was I was like, how am I going to remember all these equations? I needed like 30 different equations for this test. And so flashcards are useless. It just does not stick in my brain on how to remember stuff. And so I wrote down all the equations on a piece of paper as if I was just making my cheat sheet. And then I flipped the page over and then I wrote down all the equations again. And I flipped the page over and I wrote down all the equations again. And eventually I got to the point after about 50 times of doing that where I could write down all the equations on that piece of paper without actually having to look at the original copy. But if you, and so when it came time for the test, I just flipped the page over to the backside of the test, wrote all the equations on the backside of the test, and then took it as I normally would. And the funny thing was, if you asked me to tell you what was on the equation sheet, I couldn't tell you, but I could write it down on a piece of paper and then read it to you. So and that was kind of my aha moment. There's something weird about this, something odd. And then I've always just had a very strong art background too. Like I play guitar, I paint, I draw, I dance, and so it's just been like trying to merge that world, understanding how the brain works and how I can explain that to other people. My creative drive that I have, and then the engineering problem solving background as well. It just kind of merging those three worlds and has really blossomed into this kind of career path. So it's just been a weird obsession of mine, I guess.
Well, I mean, you're pretty articulate. I mean, I have to admit that. I mean, just listening to you, Kevin, is just a blast. I mean, it's great that you've got that creativity, and those juices are continuing to flow through even in this conversation where, we're moving along nicely, and it's a nice flow to get into and to think about how do creatives work and such. I mean, even in what I do, I have to think creatively, creatively. There we go. That's the word I was looking for. Mouth's broken. Um, even in this kind of work, because you start asking questions and then you move into other things. You hear things and you say, okay, let's move to this. So that takes a bit of a creative mind and development. And like you said, the brain does work in very strange and wonderful ways as well. So um, if people really want to get in touch with you, and I'm sure they will, Kevin, how would they go about doing that?
Yeah, the best way is to visit kevinblakely.com, and that's Kevin BLAKLEY.com, and check out the website there. My contact information is at the top. Info at kevinblakely.com is my email address, the best way to get a hold of me. And then I also have if you're interested in being a part of my research, I have the corporate assessment posted up on my website. So feel free to fill that out and send it along to whoever, just to be a part of things. And then if you're interested in setting up a meeting, I have a link on my website for that also.
Very good. Well, it's been really nice chatting with you regarding creative culture and how it works, how it's defined, and how to implement it. I think that this is a really good time to talk about this kind of thing because when we look at what's going on in our world today, it's kind of an important matter to basically engage in, and I appreciate it a lot.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on. It's been a blast and great time chatting with you.
Excellent. Well, we're going to get this up on the channel. Again, my name is Cliff. Thank you very much for watching this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. We are Candid Conversation Zoomed In and Comments video, and this is Zoomed In. I appreciate all the likes, all the comments, everything that's coming through. Please hit that subscribe button and share the video. We'll see you in the next episode.